Kiki. I'm coming to you from outer space.
I'm Sunny Apocalypse and coming from, I don't know, the garden that I wish it's so gray here, but
Yes.
whatever.
And it's
Yeah.
been very cold.
Oh my God, the snow wouldn't go away.
That I had very long hair until just a couple days ago because I've had to find a new barber. Because I'm a political science professor. And when you tell people you're a political science professor, they want to rant at you about their political beliefs. No one ever says, hey, you've studied this from 20 years from a neutral scientific perspective. What do you think? Right? Instead, it's all over the political spectrum. This is not a Republican or Democrat thing. But my old barber happened to be very Republican and loved Donald Trump. And he always wanted to talk about it. And I always was like, can we talk about the weather, the snow removal? Kids aren't in school. We always want to talk about it. And so I always try to play it as neutral as possible.
Yeah.
And my whole thing is basically like they're all screwing us, right? My whole thing is like we should not look at Democrat or Republican. We should look at not even the 1% versus all the rest of us, but like the 0.2% versus all the rest of us, I think. Yeah. And so anyway, so I always tried to frame it like that. And so I tell them, we just started the semester. I try to teach students to be, objective. So they're having to say one good thing about Donald Trump, one bad thing about Donald Trump. So he started to be like, yeah, no tax on tips. Like, that's so wonderful, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, yeah, that's a good thing. And then he's like, and these people who lie and say it's just a tax cut for the rip, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, maybe actually I think that it sort of is, and we could talk about how that's a bad thing. And this guy would not hear it, but he kept saying, you're smarter than me, you tell me. And then as soon as I spoke, he would start yelling and talk over me. And this is, as you know, this is an asshole male move that many people learn. Like, what? You do not think I'm smarter than you if you fucking talk over me and won't let me speak. So anyways, and then he also scalped me. Like, I had no hair on my head. Maybe I'll put up a picture if we ever put this online in the show notes. So then I'd always like try to be nice, and I've been going to this guy for like 7 years, try to like transcend politics.
Accommodating.
And I'm like gonna talk to this guy, and we can like find common ground. And then after that, I was like, fuck this guy. I need to voluntarily pay him money. So anyways, I found a lovely lady here who would cut it for like $20.
So I fell in love with like the Federalist Papers because here's this. Like the Constitution has been pretty much like determined, but then there's this like public discussion in the newspapers of our founders, some by their pen name, by their normal name, and some by pen names like Brutus or whatever, to show that, I don't want a federal government that has ultimate power, which is what some of our ICE agents think they have. And that's not how it's set up. And so they bitched and moaned in article after article about the Bill of Rights, because that's what begat the Bill of Rights. Like, that's what we don't allow the federal government to do to us. What would you say to your students that are like, but so like the Bill of Rights don't match with what's happening?
Like, we need to pull back, right? And that's what I want to write down. I'm glad I remember. Because you said you grew up in a rah-rah America household. I did too, though my parents, lean more left. But, we were all indoctrinated in this thing. And I think what we need to understand, and what I think this veil is lifting now, it's all actually based on patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, power, status, hierarchy, right? So sure, you have all these high-minded ideals, which we could get in, and all these other things, but it was so stratified, and it was for a very small group of people, right? So when we're like, oh, why isn't the Bill of Rights applying to everyone? Well, the Bill of Rights has not applied to the majority of Americans for the vast majority of American history. You and I were just both born white people in the 70s and 80s, right? And like that was a pretty good time to be born a white person in the United States of America, right? Like before the house of cards came crumbling down, right? And so I talk about this with my brother a lot, who's an awesome, very well-meaning guy. And he's always like, this is like so unprecedented. This is awful. And I was like, while I share all your concerns, no black person, no person who, like would actually think that like this is so shocking, right? And I come at it from someone, and this is where like I'm a political science expert, but most of the time I knew you, and most of the time I was at my previous job, I was following a lot of what I was told and not what I knew. And like now I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell you what the political science says. And I'm also going to tell you what I think. Because again, I'm a pretty smart guy who's been soaking and poking for 45 years. And like, I think that like social science has nothing, political science has nothing really to predict or say about the Donald Trump presidency. How worthless is your academic field if you have this fucking fascist monster who has taken over the country for a decade and you got nothing to say about it, but you're all making $150,000, $200,000 at Harvard doing just perpetuating the white supremacist patriarchal system that we were all born into, right? So I think what's happening right now is we're seeing the veil's lifting, I hope, in my optimistic. And so yeah, I think if we believe that stuff and if we want to make that stuff a reality, which again, in my optimistic hope is like, I always told students, we get the United States we deserve. We get the president we deserve. And I had a student but I had a student push back, and she was so right. And she was like, but Professor Hickey, what about gerrymandering, the Senate, the Electoral College? And I was like, holy fuck, you're right. We don't get the America we deserve because we're blaming all these poor people for not showing up to vote when it's basically how bad you want it, which way do you want to get screwed, right? I'm trying not to curse too much, even though I curse a lot. But like, to ask a poor person to come out to vote, like, there's no difference between the two of them. There's barely any difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. There is an enormous difference. I understand. Enormous. But for me,
I don't think she eats babies.
But for me, as a white dude in the suburbs out here, there ain't no difference really, right? Like if there's a difference for me because I am an empathetic person who is aware of and understands the horrors going on all around me, right? But like, man, most people are just trying to get through the day, right? And I think, and so let me get off that sort of soapbox. So I think there's always been this tension, right? But one of the problems is, or issues is, the founders made it really hard to sort of take over all the parts of the system. Donald Trump has been around long enough and transformed the Republican Party into a cult of personality for long enough that they've taken over a lot of parts of the system, right? So I'll shut up now, but like usually the courts or the Congress would be fighting back here, and maybe we'll see that soon if we have free and fair elections. But
I try and use my white privilege, right? So all my resisting is that. But I always forget how much privilege I do have, and that you're not always looking at the world like that.
Yeah, I think it really brings up, we're just so marinated in it, right? And you don't want to see it, and you know and like, we would like to believe all those things, right? It's like, okay, all men, which really means all people are created equal. Well, okay, why'd we say all men then, right? And like all this stuff. And so I guess sort of what I have this tension, right? Like, so here's one thing. If there's anything anybody takes away who may watch this or may answer this question. How many explicit protections for slavery are contained in the Constitution, where it explicitly protects the institution? Are there? True or false? Well, you know it's true now, right?
I'm pretty sure it's true.
Yeah.
And there is the whole 3/8 thing.
Everybody knows 3/5 compromise. That's actually not even an explicit protection, right? That's just like an implicit acknowledgement that it exists. There are two explicit protections for the institution of slavery in the Constitution. The first is we cannot get rid of the slave trade for 20 years. The second, the Constitution basically enshrines the fugitive slave clause, right? If a slave leaves a slave state, the free state has to return them. And the Civil War is sort of one of the things that caused the Civil War is the free states stopped returning the slaves, right? And that was not constitutional, blah, blah. But like, if you just ask most Americans, true or false, the Constitution explicitly protects slavery, 90-something% are going to tell you false. All men are created equal, right? And it's that's part of what is so troubling about the current Trump administration's project to get rid of history, right? Because if you actually see this stuff happening, you can see the patterns, right? But if we're never told this and we're just told rah rah America, it's a meritocracy. It just happens, it's all white dudes at the top, right? Like you'll be fine if you just work hard and you'll get there. Right, if you believe in that, right, first of all, that allows them to control you, right, and keep you compliant and just keep working away for peanuts. Everything that's being said about immigrants right now was said about my great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents or whoever it was in my generation that came over during the potato famine, right? They were dirty, they were rapists and criminals, blah, blah, blah. that was all said about Irish people and Italian people 100 years ago to justify the first immigration law passed by the federal government in the 1920s, right? The group that pushed that immigration law was the Ku Klux Klan. That is how the Ku Klux Klan became popular, pushing this idea that my great-great-grandparents were dirty, not the best and brightest, or whatever that jerk said, right? While your people who were already here, your people were the good people, right? No offense to your people, right? But this was happening 100 years ago, the exact same thing. It was just two classes of white people as opposed to, but you see even within these communities now, right? So I had a Hispanic student who said it, so I'm glad she said it because I didn't. She was like, I can't have, most of my family's voting for Trump. I don't understand it. When the comedian said Puerto Rico is a floating island of garbage, I thought they'd wake up and see. And I said, well, why do you think, when they're saying all this bad things about Puerto Ricans, Hispanic people, et cetera, do you think any members of your family believe that applies to them? And she said, no, absolutely not. Right. So you have this thing. There's always been this thing in the United States of America. I'm the good one. You're the bad one, right? Me and my people need to keep this. Like, right. We're the good ones who built this, and your people are going to be rapists, murderers, dirty, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing and again. And the sad part to me is you got people who are saying things about immigrants now, who those things were being said about their great-great-grandparents and hurting their great-great-grandparents, and they got everything good from this country, and they're just return the favor. And the worst, and I'll shut up after this, worst people, the new immigrants, are the last wave of immigrants who just got here, right? Because they did it the right way.
A month or so ago, it finally clicked. Again, my white brain and whatnot. And it's like, it's always been about slavery, hasn't it?
Yeah, ICE is just the slave catchers, right? ICE is just the news. Yeah. And these concentration camps are building. And I know, I'm going to call them concentration camps. I don't care. They're concentration camps. I know I've heard some Jewish people think that should be like reserved for Jewish people. I'm sorry if you find that offensive. I think concentration camps have existed for a long time. And these are concentration camps, and we should call them concentration camps.
Yes.
And we need to call them concentration camps now, so we don't start talking about whoever the group will be, like we're talking about Jewish people, like 100 years from now, right? Like, that's what they are. So anyways, these concentration camps, so they're just money-making schemes, right? They're owned by Trump's political donors. I think it costs $5 to talk to your family anytime you want to make a phone call. The federal government, it's all just corporate welfare. Right. And it's all like this could all be used to educate people, to feed people, to give people health care. But instead, it's going to a bunch of billionaires to do inhumane things to people. Right. And again, that's very capitalist, very American, it's all, unfortunately, the American dream come to life. It's just you and I live the good part of the American dream. And honestly, I'm still living the good part of the American dream. Right. But I just see all the horrors around me. But I really think we're just seeing it all come to fruition right now in front of our eyes.
Yeah, it's you're experiencing a historic moment like 9/11 or the wars, the whatever, just
we've had too many in our lifetimes.
We've had way too many.
COVID. I'm done with these historic moments, and we can just chill for a little bit.
Right?
So sorry, go ahead.
Like, why don't we just take care of each other? It would be so much calmer.
All that stuff is patriarchal white supremacist stuff, right? Like, it as we know, it protects the wealthy white dudes, right? They get not guilty or they don't get charged. Women are raped, and what percentage of rapists are actually convicted? Like 2, I would bet, or something like that, right? Like, I didn't know until I went to college that like every woman I know was sexually assaulted. Like, I didn't realize that when I went to college and like women started trusting me and talking to me and stuff. I was like, oh, so every single one of you is sexually assaulted in some way, huh?
Yeah.
Like I like that, and that's just the truth, right? But like, oh, it doesn't, but let's look at these statistics. It says only blah blah blah, and there's this, and like that's all just because the system exists to protect the dudes, right? And like, and to continue and to perpetuate all this stuff, right? And so, in my opinion, unfortunately, the MAGA people I know, while they were lovely people in many other aspects of their life, they have so drunk the Kool-Aid on all of it, right?
Yeah.
The misogyny, the white supremacy, they don't even know, right? And like in my sympathetic moments, it's like you don't even know how much you've been poisoned and it's sort of not your fault. And then in my unsympathetic moments, I'm like, you're also an intelligent grown human being who could have figured it out by now if you wanted to, but that would challenge your comfortable life.
But not everybody is as intelligent as you.
Everybody thinks I'm one of the good ones. I'm one of the good ones. They're not talking about me. I'm one of the good ones. And you're like, nah, man, you're not one of the good ones. I'm not. Look, I'm probably in the 5%. Again, not like we are blessed. We are very lucky financially. I made $20,000 a year for a decade. I don't feel bad about it. Like,
yeah.
They're coming for me. I say that only to understand, to say I understand they're coming for me, right? Like eventually they're coming for me and my kids. And like, if we don't say, hey, we're not going to all become slaves to the rich. Right. We're going to become slaves to the rich. Donald Trump is one of the greatest scams ever played on regular American people because he is the tool the billionaires are using to rob them blind. And he has convinced tens of millions of them to love him and fight for him to the ends of the earth, to the point where they will excuse pedophilia and sex trafficking for a guy who is actually robbing them blind. It is a fantastic trick for the wealthy to play, but we gotta, I don't know, maybe we do have to wake them up because they're coming for all of us, right? It's just the immigrants now. They're coming in this, all the security state and the data collection. Like, if we don't put up some barriers around this and like figure out how to fight back against it, like Trump's the beginning, not the end, unfortunately.